The term marijuana is the focus of tonight's show, and it's just to show how the racist roots exist within the war on drugs, especially when it comes to cannabis. So the word marijuana, it kind of has nothing actually to do with cannabis as such. It comes from Mexico, Spanish kind of an origin, really. But it's not actually known for sure where it comes from. One suggestion is that it comes from the Mexican soldiers. They had a slang term, Maria e Juana, and that was kind of a bit of a proposition to go to the brothel or to go pick up some prostitutes. So that's one possible source for it. Another possible source is an Aztec word, which is marijuana. Again, malhiwan. Yeah, that's what it was. Mallihaun. And that's translated to for prisoner. So again, it has nothing to really do with cannabis as such, but apparently the Mexicans, when they were coming into the US in the early 1900s, were possibly using that word to describe what it was that they were smoking, marijuana cigarettes. Who knows? But elsewhere before this, the term correctly used for the plant is cannabis. And that was defined by this guy that you see here with his fine looking wig. His name is Carl Linnaeus. And Carl Linnaeus is a famed botanist who actually invented the modern binomial nomenclature that we have. Basically, it's the naming system for species and organisms. He was an amazing taxonomist, and in 1953 he first described the cannabis plant in his species plantarium. So that was in 1753, and he used the name cannabis sativa, and that's now the known Latin name, and it was also the name that was applied then to all of these medicines that were widely available at the time then, not in the 1700s, mind you, a bit later on, around the late 1800s, these medicines were much more widely available. And in many of the doctors and health providers' toolkit at the time, Um, uh, as you see, yeah, the cannabis is the term that's used on all of these. You don't see marijuana anywhere. um, so you have to wonder, where does it come from? How is cannabis and marijuana? How is it so used interchangeably? And it was done quite well actually. So at the time, back in the early 1900s, you have a civil war or a revolution that's going on down in Mexico, and the Mexican border here, as you see, it runs just alongside of America, and you have Texas and New Mexico there. And those states around the early 1900s, 1910, 1920, had a massive influx of immigrants fleeing troubles in Mexico because of the wars that were going on there. You had a general, I have his name here, General Porfirio Diaz. He was overthrown in 1910, and that saw a major increase in the amount of migrants coming into America at the time. Now, America at the time, it was doing okay, but it wasn't doing very well. They had just introduced the Harrison Act, the Harrison Narcotics Act of 1914, which again, kind of, funnily enough, it was a bit of a racist thing as well, because that was used to pick on the Chinese immigrants that were in America at the time, because it was the Chinese immigrants who were smoking opium in the opium dens more than the other people. So again, it was just another tool that the state and the authorities used to target people that they didn't like. Um, and then not long after the Harrison Act, you have the Volstead Act of 1920, which brought about these guys. We have the Bureau for Prohibition. So in 1919, you had the enactment of the Volstead Act, and that brought about the formation of the Bureau for Prohibition. Yeah, these guys basically prohibited alcohol at the time, and you know, I'm actually going to do another show on this because it deserves one in itself. All of the stuff that went on there in the time of alcohol prohibition, And there's a lot we can learn from that, and how it's mirrored in current modern day prohibition. Um, so you had the prohibition guys at the time, they were going around stopping people from drinking, and that came to an end in 1933. But before that came to an end, we had this guy, Harry J. Anslinger, come in and take. He was the assistant commissioner for the Bureau for Prohibition. He took up that position in was it 1929, and when he took up that position, previous to this, he had expressed no problems with cannabis. In fact, he's actually on record in saying that it's not a problem. But then he comes in and he takes up the reins as this position here as commissioner, and his tune changes. They can see that alcohol prohibition is coming to an end. They know that the repeal is going to pass in 1933. So they're putting the gears in motion to vilify some other things, and marijuana, cannabis, is the thing in which they went to seek about demonizing. So we have a lovely quote here from him where he's addressing the Congress with this, and he's quoted saying there are 100,000 total marijuana smokers in the US, and most are Negroes, Hispanics, Filipinos, and entertainers. Their satanic music, jazz, and swing results from marijuana usage. This marijuana causes white women to seek sexual relations with Negroes and entertainers and any others. Like, that's madness. Like, as if like some woman out there is going to smoke a joint and all of a sudden she's just going to crave some black sausage. Like, that's madness. Like, but this was the kind of the nonsense that these guys were spinning. Now, when you look at that, like, if you look at the word marijuana, and why it's important that they use that there is because people have cannabis medicines in their cupboards, as I was saying earlier, like, people have these cannabis medicines in their cupboard, and they're aware of what cannabis is, so this guy, Harry J. Anslinger, like, for his own nefarious reasons, like, obviously the guy wanted to keep himself in a job. He thought about demonizing this, and he done it by just pulling the wool over people's eyes. Basically, he tricked them to thinking that marijuana was this new thing that these Mexicans and these black people and these jazz musicians, like, as the guy hated jazz as well, it was something new that they were all doing, and it had no connection to this cannabis that was in your medicine cupboard that your doctor was giving you, so quite sneaky actually, and with Harry J. Anslinger, he partnered up then in the 1930s with this guy, William Randolph Hearst. Now, William Randolph Hearst, if you're not familiar with this guy, he's an elitist media tycoon, and there's some conspiracies there that he had vested interest in paper mills, that basically hemp was going to compete against. So he had a vested bias there to demonize cannabis, hemp, in order to keep his industry above, because basically hemp is a much better quality paper than wood paper. It's much more economical, environmentally friendly, and this guy partnered up with Harry J. Anslinger, and they put out like piles of media articles across the US demonizing marijuana, not cannabis, marijuana. And I'm just going to pop up this guy here. They did what was known as gore files. So they went with the police, and they found police reports that the most violent police reports they could find that had any links to marijuana. And look at this guy here, like, just look at him. He just has all the looks of crazy. But this guy killed his entire family with an axe. And what they done is they basically took the fact that apparently he was under the influence of marijuana, and he killed his family. And they've put this out in the newspaper that, oh yeah, this marijuana that these immigrants are bringing into the country, it's making people crazy. It got this guy to chop up his family while they sleep. I think it says here his mother, father, sister, and two brothers. Um, this guy was psychologically assessed afterwards, and none of the reports was there any correlation to his cannabis use, to his mental illness, because basically the guy was crazy. Before he killed his family, there was 2 attempts to have him and died in the mental facilities or what have you. And even after he killed his family, he escaped them. Like, so he was a fair bit of a handful. Like, But again, like these prohibitionists, these propagandists, they used his story to vilify marijuana. And they didn't use the term cannabis again. As I say, because cannabis was something that was in people's medicines cupboards at the time. Whereas marijuana was not, and just the word marijuana, it's a nice foreign exotic term. It's not what you would have in your medicine cupboard, as I say, So they used this guy's story to vilify it, and not long after that, then in 1936, you had the release of this movie, Reefer Madness. Reefer Madness is actually a movie we played it in college one night as a bit of as a social event for the Students for Sensible Drug Policy, because to watch it, it's actually quite comical. Some of the stuff that they spout in it. There's actually a warning at the start of the movie, like disclaiming that the truth of everything that you're going to see, and it's mad, like. But I'm going to just quickly play a clip there from this movie. Just so you can get a little taste of what's in it. So I hope you enjoy this. I'll be back to you in just a minute.
Master. Wait, Master. Plate, Master. I know what you want. You want to kill me.
You're crazy. Take it easy, kid. I just want to talk to you.
So guys, that's just a little bit of what you would find in Reefer Madness. So if you haven't ever actually seen it, like it's definitely one to sit down and have a smoke and watch, because it's actually hilarious, the stuff they put out in this, and this was brought on like a national tour across America by some of these same people who were going across, like spouting the alcohol prohibition beforehand, because they had nothing better to be doing now that alcohol was legal again. And like people actually believed some of the stuff in these movies, like some of the Reefer Madness as it goes. It is crazy, like. But as I say, we screened that inside in CIT as a social event for the students, and yeah, we got a great response to it. Like we had some great discussions then afterwards as well about the movie, and yeah, everyone had a good laugh at just some of the stupid stuff inside it. Like there was another scene in it where the guy just like drives over the guy inside in the car, but they're going about like 30-40 miles an hour is like the top speed of a car back then, like. So it's just all comical kind of stuff, like. But our buddy Harry J. Anslinger as well, he only got his job because his wife her uncle gave him it. He was the secretary of the Treasury Department at the time, like, so he actually only got his job because of that. But yeah, not long after this movie, then we had the passing of the Marijuana Tax Act in America. And again, like the Marijuana Tax Act, like again, it's just a sneaky way in which they got about criminalizing this plant, because if they were to start off day one with the cannabis like prohibition, it probably wouldn't have passed, because a lot more people would have got up in arms about it, because as I say, people had cannabis medicines in their cupboard and people were aware of what cannabis was and what it does. Whereas now, oh, marijuana, oh, it's this new thing, like, and people are fearful of new things, like, and it's easier to demonize it and criminalize it then when it's this new thing. And when it's not the thing that your neighbors do, your white neighbors, oh no, it's these Mexicans, it's these blacks, it's they're using the marijuana. So the Marijuana Tax Act was passed in 1937, and this guy here, I have his name written down. His name is Samuel R. Caldwell, and he was the very first guy in America to be arrested for cannabis, and he was arrested selling 2 marijuana cigarettes to a guy. He was caught then with another 6 marijuana cigarettes in his possession and 6 more ounces of marijuana. For this guy got 4 years in prison, and he was 58 at the time, I think it was. Yeah, he was 58 at the time, and he got released, and he died not long after when he was released, unfortunately. And when he was being sentenced, the judge actually, this is what the judge said, and I had to write it down because, as I said, this was the first guy to be criminalized in America for marijuana. I consider marijuana the worst of all narcotics, far worse than the use of morphine or cocaine. Under its influence, men become beasts. Marijuana destroys life itself. I have no sympathy for those who sell this weed. The government is going to enforce this law to the letter. And I suppose somewhat they did. They did enforce that Marijuana Act, because lo and behold, the cannabis medicines slowly started disappearing from the cupboards. Medicines then like aspirin became much more available as they were coming to the market. It was easier for doctors then to stop working with cannabis medicines and start working with some of these other pain relieving medicines. Some of them, which we know today, aren't as effective as cannabis medicines, as we have many people in Ireland and outside of Ireland. We have Irish patients. One who I talked to last week, Alicia Maher, who suffers with chronic pain. She uses cannabis and gets tremendous benefits from it. But it was because of this Marijuana Act of 1937 that these cannabis medicines slowly started disappearing from the medicine cabinets. The British Herbal Pharmacopoeia, which was it's a standard reference guide for doctors and herbalists and naturopaths for natural medicines. In 1936, I just double check that if I'm correct. It was 1932 actually. Yeah, I'm glad I double checked that. 1932, the British Herbal Pharmacopoeia removed cannabis from its listing. In 1942, the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia removed its listing of cannabis. So, the evidence of cannabis as a medicine was being erased from the textbooks which were to store and carry this information into the future. And it was done in order to aid these prohibitionists. We had a mother, Vera Toomey, who had to walk across the island of Ireland, from Cork to Dublin, which is pretty much the island of Ireland, just to get access to it, and one of the ways in which it's been denied to her has been to argue that there's not enough evidence there to support its use. But the evidence was removed because of these prohibitionists. As I say, cannabis was removed from herbal pharmacopoeias. It was also removed from the Indian Herbal Pharmacopoeia in 1966, Then we had, you have your United Nations their narcotics bill, that basically put in motion the prohibition across the globe, on a global scale. And that was all pushed by the Americans. At the time in America, I suppose there was a lot going on. They had a lot of things, as I said, this happened in 1937. In the 1940s and 50s, you had the civil rights movement. You had a lot of people getting up, standing up, fighting for their rights from the black community. And then not long after that, then also they had wars going on over there where they have people in the 60s, going out saying, make love, not war. The hippies, they were up against the war movement. And then we had a guy by the name of Nixon come into the presidency. And what did Nixon do? But he went and doubled down on this Marijuana Tax Act and the other drug laws that were there. And he signed off in 1970 on the Controlled Substances Act. And what that did, that put cannabis or marijuana into a Schedule 1, which means it has no medicinal benefits. None. Like, that's what it means. It has no medicinal benefits and it has a high potential for abuse. That's what this guy did, and as I said, like, they had a lot going on in America at the time. The civil rights movement, even at this time in the 1970s, you've like the Black Panthers were forming. So there was a lot of stuff going on there. And what they did is they used the common thing that these people had, like black people and the hippies. They tried to demonize black people by associating them with heroin and crack cocaine and the likes. And they tried to demonize the hippies by associating them with cannabis and the psychedelics and all of those other things, In the 80s or 90s, the Nixon's aide actually came out and admitted what it was that they were doing. And he said this. He said, "We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or be black. But by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did." There we go. And guys, with this in mind, actually, Ireland just put in place what was his name, Frank Feehan or something like that. Frank Feehan, he's our new drug strategy. He's the guy involved in charge of Ireland's drug strategy. He believes that cannabis is a gateway drug. He believes alcohol is a gateway drug also, I think I've heard him saying. Which I do kind of believe alcohol is a bit of a bigger gateway drug than cannabis, but only in that alcohol lowers your decision-making capacity. Cannabis, maybe you could argue that, but I've never done cannabis and wanted to do cocaine. I've been drunk and offered cocaine, and I took cocaine in a drunken state just because I was drunk. I wouldn't take it sober. So, but Frank Feehan, our drugs minister, now believes that cannabis is a gateway drug. Some mad outdated stuff like reefer madness time, right? Yeah, so just throwing that out there, making it somewhat relevant, I suppose, to the Irish, bringing it into the Irish context. So, guys, that's kind of it there. In reality, it's all from the US perspective, really. The drugs war comes from the US. It was brought into Ireland through the UN. Ireland adopted the first drug arrest in Ireland, I think, was in 1964. As I said, that was a Nigerian student from Trinity, and not long after his arrest, actually, he went and committed suicide before he actually was brought to court and charged. That was in 1964. And as I say, like, those drug laws are only in Ireland now today because of the US. And we can see why they started in the US. As I say, like, the heroin laws that first came in 1914 were to target the Chinese immigrants that they had there. Then in the 1930s, they had the Marijuana Act that came in. And again, that was just target the Mexicans and the blacks and the jazz musicians, And then it just got out of control, power corrupts. Like once these guys got a taste for power, it was very hard for them to give it back. But it's up to us now, the people, I suppose, really to take it back from them. And that's why I'm here now and just getting this message out there, letting you all know this stuff, because we were lied to a long time ago. Cannabis should never have been illegal. It should be studied. Like, there should be colleges growing high quality cannabis and bringing patients and doing like life-saving research. But no, we demonize it. I was allowed to work with aspirin. I can take aspirin and die, I can overdose on aspirin. I was allowed to work with aspirin in college, but I couldn't work with cannabis, THC. It's impossible for me to take enough THC and kill myself, but I'm not allowed to work with that in college as a third level student. But I can work with aspirin and other deadly chemicals, dichloromethane and all of that other crazy stuff. We can work with all of that stuff, but I couldn't work with cannabis, So I'd rant on here all night again, guys, about this, really. So, like, that's it. Look, the drug war has racist roots. If you support the drug war, if you support prohibition, you're supporting racists. So put that in your pipe and smoke it, guys. This is Martin Condon, guys, from Martin's World, signing off. Be sure to go over and check out martinsworld.ie, where you can find some of the products that I'll be selling, and get in touch through Facebook, Instagram, or email if you'd like to make a purchase, and keep an eye out for when you'll be able to make those purchases up there too in Bitcoin.